forgive the chat being on my screen for a moment here. I'm going to leave it up just for a second in case anybody needs to share anything with me. If someone could give me a mic check in the chat, that would be helpful, just so I can be sure that I am being heard. But it looks like I'm now live, so hopefully we have people filtering in. Thank you, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. I'll get rid of the chat window here in just a second, just leaving it there just in case there's any technical difficulty anybody needs to let me know about. So welcome to the Microsoft 365 Chicago event. I'm thrilled to be here as a speaker, thrilled to have all of you here. Mostly thrilled for the people who've set this up. I've kind of watched it come together, and I know a number of people have worked very hard to bring together a ton of great content and speakers and all the logistics behind the scenes. So many thanks to that group of people who I won't try to name, or I'll lose track of all of them. But many thanks to that group of people for all the effort they put into doing this. And thank you for having me do this track keynote. So for this track, we're going to start just by talking about this broad topic of creating a people-centric workplace with Microsoft 365. So we're going to jump right into it. We have a ton of content. I am going to pop away from the chat window here. So if you need to share something with me, I won't see it. And unfortunately, I don't have dual screens or anything like that. I'm away from the typical home office today, so I've just got my one monitor. But I'll check back on that real quickly just to make sure before we get in to see if anyone's trying to desperately get any message to me. So first of all, I want to say a huge thank you also to all of our sponsors. So a number of companies have really stepped up, sponsored this virtual event. I would invite everybody attending today, please go visit with those sponsors. Every single one of them, they make this possible. They do the funding that makes it possible for people to create the time and the resources and the energy to bring all of these components together. So use Teams, reach out to them, learn about what these organizations do. Probably many of them offer services or products that you and your organization could benefit from. So take a little bit of time to do that, because we want to keep getting together like this as a community and sharing great content. And it's folks like this who are investing to make this continue to happen. And along those lines, I want to play a quick video from one of our sponsors for you. So I'm going to quiet down as this gets played in sound so you can hear all of this well. Enjoy it. Again to our sponsors. I don't see any messages here, so I'm assuming we are rolling, and I'm continuing to roll on. Won't be looking at those again. One other message for you here as we get started. Microsoft 365 Chicago is supporting Chicago Public Schools as a part of what they're doing today. Please take a moment, use your phone to scan these or grab those little short links below each of those and follow up with this. This is a great organization doing great things for Chicago and for the kids in the city of Chicago, opening up a better and better future for them. So take the time, please, to participate in this. It is a great cause, a great organization, simple to get involved, not a lot of funding involved, and something you can do that changes a life. So thank you for that. I think that slide will appear before every session. So if you missed it for my session, have your phone ready or your OneNote ready to quickly grab that link so you can grab it in follow-up sessions as well. So I want to start today by talking about another time of huge transformation, right? We had a great opening keynote. I got to enjoy most of that, talking a lot about transformation and some of the discomfort that sometimes creates. I want to flash back to another time in history where we're going through another transformation that probably felt similar to this one in many ways. And that's the dawn of the Industrial Revolution. So I'm going all the way back to about 1840, as people are beginning to flock to urban centers, to cities all over the world, and particularly we're going to focus on the United States, for the promise of a better life, for jobs, for security, for a future for them, for their families, for their children, for generations to come. But as they flocked to those urban centers, they were finding that the promise was not always what they thought it would be. Overpopulation was a huge problem. Sanitation conditions, very poor. Infant mortality was very high. And joblessness was also very high. More people came than these places could support. So as a result, there was a lot of unrest, a lot of dissatisfied folks. Again, sounding kind of similar to our transformation today. Well, at that time, Chicago, which is fun to talk about that today, Chicago was this little podunk frontier town. They were something like number 73 in terms of the size of US cities at that time. And they were kind of just beginning to experience growth, but they could see it was probably going to really take off. Baltimore, Maryland, by contrast, was a city on a hill. It was the second largest city in the United States of America at that time, if you can believe that. And they looked around and said, our future is great. We're a port town. We have a great industrial base. We're strategically located between a lot of other growing cities in our area, New York, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia. So they felt very secure in their future. Well, at that time, Chicago made a pretty revolutionary decision. They looked around at their city and other cities and said, if we're going to create the city of the future, if we're going to create a place where people want to come and where we treat people the way we want to treat people, we need to make some investments. So Chicago, podunk little Chicago at the time, was the first major US city to install and invest in a comprehensive sewage system. Now, in hindsight, that looks like a no-brainer, but at the time, that looked a little bit crazy. That looked a little bit like, what's really happening here? We've never had to do this before. But you can actually see the blue bar there. Chicago's growth took off partly because of this futuristic view of what they needed to do to accommodate and plan for the citizens of the future, the businesses of the future, and the cities of the future. Baltimore, Maryland, however, feeling secure in their future and also looking around and saying, you know what, we have an infrastructure in place already that's going to be difficult to upfit with all of this, right? We've already got buildings and all sorts of infrastructure under those buildings. And so trying to put in a modern sewage system in this city is going to be expensive. And why do we need to? We're big, we're solid, we're not going anywhere, we're going to be fine. And you can actually see what happened to Baltimore, Maryland's growth and what happened to Chicago, Illinois' growth as a result of this. And it's interesting, I'm doing this today virtually in Chicago. I did it about a year and a half ago in DC, and someone who worked in the Baltimore, Maryland sewage system actually attended that session and made me very nervous. I knew she was there before I got started, and she came up afterwards and said, I know our history, you're exactly right, and we still struggle with those bad decisions today. It's antiquated, it's out of date, it's not working for us well. So as we look at this time in history and what organizations were doing at it, we can learn some really important lessons about ourselves, right? So when cities don't change with their citizens, bad things happen, right? Those cities were not able to keep up. Now, a city doesn't necessarily go anywhere, they go on. Not necessarily the same with organizations. Our society is changing, our people are changing, humans are changing, employees are changing, customers are changing, competition is changing, technology is changing, and organizations need to keep up, or they're going to be the Baltimores of the future or the Chicagos of the future if they choose to keep up. So with that in mind, I wanted to talk a little bit about what that looks like. Quick introduction to me. My name is Geoff Ables. I run a firm based here in the United States, and I geek out on this idea of, I love the term humans first that Microsoft puts out there, but this idea of people first combined with technology, right? So not technology as a way to replace relationships or to do relationships differently, but as a way to go broader and deeper person to person than we've ever been able to do before. So again, not a replacement for all those in-person encounters also, but a way to kind of say we can have more relationships of a higher quality and more depth than ever before by leveraging technology. We're not replacing with a shallow way of doing relationships, and we're struggling through that together. And those relationships are at a human level, those relationships are at a business level. And here's some of my relationships that are most important to me. I'm actually speaking to you from Wilmington, North Carolina today. That's not my hometown. It's about 3 hours from my hometown, but that's where my daughter, son-in-law, and our grandson, Theodore Evergreen Tremolini there with the little onesie. You can probably tell which one he is in the picture. So we're visiting with him. And for the first time ever, by the way, my father, who's fairly elderly, is able to be together. So we have 4 generations all together for the first time ever. Because of this COVID thing, it's taken us a little while longer to do that. Theodore is now 7 or 8 months old, I believe. And this is my family. My daughters are married. My wife and I have an empty nest now. We love sampling fine spirits. We love riding our motorcycle together, try not to combine those things. And a couple of years ago, we adopted this little pup, Verdi, to help fill our empty nest a little bit. So I hope I can get to know all of you guys better. There's my contact information. There's my name. I'm pretty easy to find everywhere because my name's kind of unique. look me up, let's link up. But for now, let's dive into some of our content. I'm going to pop over here once more just because I'm feeling insecure about making sure that everyone can hear me. Looks like they can. So when we look at this idea of transformation, a lot of business leaders say, we want to transform. We want to go from this cumbersome, slow caterpillar to this beautiful, agile butterfly, right? We all have this vision for that kind of transformation. And so we say, let's get an easy button, right? Let's go do something like, let's buy some Microsoft 365 licenses. Let's implement SharePoint. Let's do a Dynamics project. And we start clicking that easy button, or more likely than not, what happens is somebody internally has delegated the task to you to click that easy button. And you've clicked that easy button a few times and it doesn't go exactly the way you want it to. And you keep trying to click that easy button, or someone else keeps telling you to click that easy button. And at some point in time, you realize maybe that's not what it actually says on that button after all, right? So my last poop joke of the day, but we realize that it's not as easy as installing technology, right? Transformation, human change is always challenging. It's always difficult. And in this case, it's particularly difficult. The struggle is real. You're not alone in probably having a few things that have gone well, probably having a number of things that you're still struggling with, even though you kind of say that it's up and running and in production. Is it really adopted the way you want it to be adopted? Are people really taking advantage of it the way they should be? Is it helpful? Is it hurtful? You may not even know the answer to that question sometimes. That struggle is real, according to recent information from Forbes magazine. What I would contend is this: we are in a new world. We're in the world of people-first digital projects. And up until recently, from the dawn of the Industrial Revolution all the way up until relatively recently, we were in technology-centric or task-centric projects. And task first is very different from people first. And so the way we think about it and the way we do it needs to change. And when we take people who are great at task first, which is still important, and say, well, they did those processes, let's reassign them and take that same thinking to people first, we have a lot of struggles because we need to change how we think, not just about what we're rolling out, but how we're approaching our teams with it. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. Through our history, and some of it very humbling history, we've seen a lot of projects that weren't as successful as we had hoped they were, or we've been on the tail end of coming in and fixing projects that weren't as successful as they should have been. And we've had the luxury of some great clients who've worked with us and helped us to learn, and they've learned along with us. And through that, we've come up with these 5 principles. And the interesting thing about these 5 principles that really emerged years ago is that they are the same principles central to all human relationships. There's nothing new here at all. The only new thing is we now have the ability to do people first at a larger scale than we've ever had before. And when you do things at a larger scale, the underlying principles don't change, but the rules change. Some of the processes change. And so that's what I want to talk about today: is what's the principle, but then how are some organizations effectively doing that today? So let's dive right in and talk about this. First of the 5 principles is the principle of listening. And you guys probably intuitively know this, right? Human relationships all are built on a foundation of listening. You listen first, right? You want to hear what people are saying. You want to write it down on the tablet of your heart and in your memory. You want to know their stories so that you can later connect with them better. We all yearn to be heard, and we intuitively know that others yearn to be heard as well. When we scale that to work in business, in a digital workplace, listening is about data, right? It's about your ears, all the channels that information is coming in through, and it's about your memory, your corporate memory, your data, your content, where you're storing all of that information. But the problem is we've gotten into a very complex modern organization. We don't just have 2 ears, we have ears all over the place. The modern employee has to use dozens of applications to get their jobs done every day. And so to hear what's going on, to find that one important contract or that one important customer record or that one important communication, sometimes we're going to 5, 10, 15 places trying to track it down. We're not sure if we have the latest version. We might have to go interrupt our coworkers and ask them. And it's overwhelming. Listening is not an easy thing. It's almost this heroic effort because of the complexity of the modern organization. And employee satisfaction research that we've done would even suggest the reality of this. So when we interviewed individuals and asked about success or failure of how their projects went, what we found were as an employee satisfaction indicator, when you have 2 or fewer enterprise systems to get your job done, your job satisfaction is much higher than if you have just 3 or more enterprise systems you have to access to get your job done. Now, we didn't have a good enough sample size to kind of extrapolate that across what if you have 4 or 5 or 10. We assume it gets even worse as you go higher. But this is a huge difference. Going from just 2 systems to just 3 systems, huge drop in employee satisfaction. The second of the 5 principles is a principle of understanding. And at a human level, Stephen Covey told us, among many great things Stephen Covey told us, was one of our failures as humans is we listen with the intent to respond rather than with the intent to truly understand, right? So listening is great, writing things down in your memory is great, but do you really connect with the context of where someone is coming from? Do you really know what's going on in their mind and their heart, right? Not just facts and figures, but have you analyzed? And that's what understanding is. It's the principle of analytics. It's understanding all the facts and figures behind what's going on with each other, with your colleagues, with your customers. How important is this? According to this research from IBM, it might be the most important differentiator that differentiates the best organizations from all the rest. Their annual CEO survey, they looked at it and said, among the best, fastest growing organizations, what differentiates them from everyone else? And don't hear that as the successful from the unsuccessful. It's the best from many others who are also fairly successful. And it has everything to do with data, content, and analytics, as you can see from this slide. So that's great, but as we see that and we see what's going on with our data and content and this exponential growth, we get excited around topics like big data and Azure machine learning and artificial intelligence and all those other things. And those are cool topics. But as we talk about all this new data becoming available to us, what we sometimes fail to notice is the amount of bad data is actually growing faster than the overall growth of data in general. So of that data you're generating today, that content that's going into your SharePoint today, within 2 years, 53 to 80% of it is going to be what I call ROTI. And that's information that's redundant, outdated, trivial, inaccurate, or incomplete. And if that's hard to believe, just notice what you do over the next week or two. When you look for a piece of information, when you look for something that should be in an email, when you go try to find your latest holiday calendar, whatever it is, notice the amount of bad or irrelevant or outdated information you have to filter through to find the actual piece of information you're looking for. And you are probably better at finding it than most, simply because you're the type of person who's at this event. So what do we do about this problem? Yes, we have all this opportunity of all this great new data, but what do we do to mitigate the problem of bad data? Well, one legal firm looked at it this way. They said, look, we have become pack rats, right? We are data hoarders, kind of like, this gal who is a physical stuff hoarder. We in this century are data hoarders. We never delete anything, right? We always keep accumulating and accumulating because I might need that at some point in the future. And I'll raise my hand, guilty for sure of that. As we were working with one law firm, one of the senior people in the law firm looking at this problem in a large meeting said, well, let's handle it like we manage our physical workplace. Let's have everyone take turns, kind of mopping the floors and cleaning the toilets and emptying the garbage cans. And someone else said, are you crazy? We don't work that way. And if we did, no one would work here at the end of a month, right? We have other things to do that are more important than that. We outsource that. And the person who raised the idea said, well, that's exactly right. So why are we approaching our content and our data that way? Why are we saying keeping data clean is everybody's job? Yes, keeping your private workspace clean, your desktop clean in the physical workplace, that needs to be your own job. But everywhere else, it shouldn't be. There are experts who do this all the time. We either need to find them and hire them or find them and outsource this to them. And that's what they did in this particular case. Part of what they also did was said, we need to architect how our data is stored and how it's governed well too. So I bring all this up to kind of say part of this is automatable, part of this is not. And automation is catching up. It's constantly bringing us new opportunities here to do things better. But I think we as technical people sometimes say, well, we either automate it with the right settings and the right processes that happen regularly, or nothing happens. And really, information architecture and good governance aren't 100% automatable right now, right? The term governance implies the idea that you actually need to do some physical governing of things that are in place. Policy has to do with policing of things that are already in place. You need some humans to do some of this work as well. It may not be the humans who are generating the content. And in fact, the humans that are generating the content, that's probably their highest and best contribution that they can make. Having them organize content might be a really poor use of their time. And frankly, they may not be very good at it. And you can look at persona analysis to kind of draw this out. This law firm tapped into that and did a great job with that. I'm going to pop over here real quick. No more messages. I see a few. Let me just check and make sure. I can hear you. Yes, we can hear you. Thank you to whoever sent me that. Okay, perfect. So a couple other case studies for the analytics side of these principles I'm going through. This actually comes from an organization in Southern California. They are an e-commerce organization, and one of the things they spent a lot of time on in their customer service group is processing warranty return claims. So customer buys their product, customer calls back and says it's damaged, I want to replace it, and they provide a warranty. Well, whenever the customer does that, they say, okay, you need to take a picture where the serial number is, because we have to make sure that serial number is one of the ones that's covered under warranty, and a picture of the damage to make sure it's a kind of damage we protect. It took an average of 5 days per incident for them to respond to those, because someone in customer service had to go through every one of those pictures, make sure that it was properly covered, authorize it, and then send the return out to the customer. Using image recognition technology that's available through Azure and now through some of the Power Automate features, they're able to start training this to say, when those pictures come in, recognize these, do OCR to look at the serial numbers and recognize, does this damage look like it's covered by warranty? It's not perfect. They get about, I think, 63% of these automated, completely taken care of without human interaction at all. Others have a certainty score that's a little lower and require human intervention. But now those humans are only evaluating about 35% of the things they used to evaluate. The automated ones have dropped from about a 5-day response time to less than a day response time to go back to the customer and say, yes, this is covered, or no, it's not. The non-automated ones have dropped down to 2 days because the customer service reps don't have as many of these things they need to backlog to go through at one time. Another case study, a facilities management team in an organization in South Carolina. So facilities management, they're the ones who make sure that the lights are turned on and the workplace is safe and all of those kinds of things. They do tons of contract management, lots of purchase orders, lots of invoicing. They keep machinery up to date and all of those things. Whenever those came in, they were scanning them and loading them into SharePoint, and they were having to essentially type in the metadata columns, the extra columns of data about these things, like when does this agreement expire? What part of the industry of the business does this cover? What building is it for? All those different things. Now, through SharePoint Synex, they're beginning to envision and work on automating that. So we take away that inhuman task of having to retype in stuff that's in all those documents and instead recognize it in the documents and autofill the metadata, allowing humans to do what humans do best and machines to do the rest. Another organization in Texas, a waste management company, they're able to now actually give every one of their customer service reps a real-time coach. So through monitoring telephone activity, the real-time coach is able to say, you're speaking at a cadence that isn't as good for our customers. Your customer service reviews are a little lower because of this. You're using negative words. You should use more positive words, all of those things. Now, a manager can still review this with their people and be more efficient at giving them feedback. But now the folks don't have to wait for a manager to interact with them to get feedback and improve what they're doing rapidly. Onboarding people more rapidly, providing better customer experiences, and helping humans be better humans. So I don't know how many of you are into wine. As I said up front, I am. I really enjoy wine. And when you get around a lot of people who are kind of wine aficionados, or really in Europe, they do this a lot, whether you're aficionado or not, you may notice that when they bring their glasses together and toast, every time their glasses ting, touch each other, they make a brief moment of eye contact with whoever they're touching the glass with, just one at a time. Why do they do that? Not all of us do that. If you kind of don't know wine culture, you may not think about that, but adopt it now as a principle, because the reason why they do that is it is that one moment of a personal soul level connection. And it's that one moment of saying, the reason we come together to enjoy a beautiful wine is not because of the wine, it's because the wine brings us together as human beings. But the point of all that is not that that's a beautiful tradition. The point of that is every human being can learn how to do that. It is a habit. In the business world, habits are called processes. And I think we often mistake this for, well, there are people who are good connectors and there are people who aren't good connectors. And so the good connectors will connect well and the poor connectors will connect poorly. And to some extent, yes, that is true of human beings. But to some extent, we can all learn habits. We can all learn to make a brief moment of eye contact as we bring our glasses together. And we can create more and better and deeper human connections by improving those. And technology can help us do that. Connecting is the process stage. Listening is the data. Understanding is the analysis. Connecting is the action. It's where the action is, but it's not what a lot of people think the action looks like. So how important is process? Can we really change human behavior? Can we really change how we relate to each other if we understand and work better with processes? These figures and hundreds of others like them would say an absolute resounding yes. Process, good habits can absolutely change not just how we relate to each other, not just how satisfied we are with our work, not just how long we last where we're working, but also real financial returns on the investment we make in that as well. But those processes are different. And I alluded to this at the beginning, right? In the old world, our processes were very rigid. They were like train tracks, right? Accounting processes. You don't veer off the tracks very much at all. If you do, it takes a lot of planning. Whereas modern people-centric processes tend to be more flexible. But if you look at people-connected people, they tend to be extremely flexible, maybe all flexible and no rigid. And if you look at people who've developed old world task-first processes, they tend to be all rigid, very little flexibility. The reality is, in our modern workplace, we need more processes that are people first and that have a rigid core. So they still have rims. They're repeatable, improvable, measurable, and scalable. If you can't do those things with a process, I would argue you probably don't really have a process. But they still need flexible edges. They need to be able to sail. So they need to be simple, easy to remember, easy to do, agile. They change. Agility means we can move quickly, right? A train, not very agile, right? It's not going to change direction quickly. They need to be innovation enabled. Out there on the flexible edge, that's where you're innovating. That's where you're finding new things. And that feedback goes back to the rigid core to say, we found this works well. And because we have a rigid core, we have a modifiable core where we can communicate that out to everybody on the team, and we can rapidly enable new and improved processes all the time. And they need to be low friction. Processes need to not get in the way of getting the job done, but they need to be something that you practically fall through the process almost automatically as you continue to improve it. To do that, the successful companies are reinventing how they're thinking about process. They're going from the old school, rigid flowchart types of diagrams where you just have very rigid structured decision trees. There's still room for those, mind you, but many of their processes that are human centric are now becoming more design thinking types of projects, like this journey map and persona analysis that we did for one of our clients, where it's not necessarily a rigid set of lines. There's a lot of ways to navigate once you get inside of this, but there are stories being made, there are things happening, there are decisions happening that can be influenced throughout this. And so you're always looking for how you can take those worst experiences and make them better, and how you can take those great experiences and you can make them game changers. You can make them amazing moments for your customers and your employees. So one simple example of this is a client who was using Slack, and they had their proposal process built into Slack. And so one of the things that you probably see often is whenever they wanted to do a new proposal, they just go find one that they've done recently that they kind of liked, and they build from that. Even though they did have proposal templates that their leadership and their marketing and their sales management really wanted them to use. There were dozens of variations in all of these things. As a result, the approval process was very confusing. They'd load those documents into Slack. They'd put a Slack message out there for someone to approve it, and people would drift in and out and oftentimes have to be reminded to do things as a result. Documents were very confusing. There was no naming standard, so they couldn't easily find things. So it was taking them between 2 to 12 hours over a multi-day process. So not 2 to 12 hours from start to finish, but it's usually a week or more to get through this. And it was consuming quite a bit of time that didn't need to consume to do this. Well, they went out and bought Microsoft 365 and saw Teams and said, hey, we're going to get rid of Slack to save some licensing money. Let's migrate this to Teams. And we took a look at it and said, we can do a crappy process in Slack and make it a crappy process in Teams if you want, but you have a lot of other tools available to you now that we should discuss. And so by looking at that, what we essentially were able to help them do is to say, look, let's create a simple Power App. And it was really just a slide out modifying the SharePoint list form in Power Apps to gather the information you need to say, okay, based on this dropdown, we're going to know which template to choose. Based on these other things you're going to fill in, we're going to actually be able to mail merge some of that information for you. And by the way, we're also going to select a record from your Dynamics 365 application in here as well, where we're going to fetch more mail merge information that you won't have to retype in. Then through a Power Automate flow, we're then able to go through and say, okay, go grab the right template, go do the mail merge with that template, set that up for the end user to review, because you still need to do some modification on your own, but save it under a common naming convention in a common location. When that person's done, trigger an approval process. That approval process is going to go to the right individuals. You're going to have a dashboard to monitor all those, to then see what's approved and what's not. And the end of that, all of that is, now it's moved over to here, and you kind of see some of the things I talked through. That entire process consumes about 15 minutes of time. The only variable being how long will it take to modify that document for whatever is unique to that client. But if nothing unique is going on, it's a very swift process, and you can usually generate a proposal in less than a day, which is a better customer experience, and they're winning more deals, but they're also saving a lot of time as a result. So a simple way to automate how they're connecting internally to create better connections externally. So the fourth principle that the champions follow that the others struggle with is a principle that we call know. And it really means knowing the results so you can continuously improve. Every human being that has great human relationships does this all the time, right? They're evaluating things in aggregate. After this session, you guys will give me some feedback, and I'll look at that in aggregate to say, what can I do better the next time I do this? But they also look at it individually. How do I connect with this person better and at a more human level? When we look at this at a scaled level, it is about three things. It's about knowing the score, it's about sharing the score, and it's about giving every individual on the team, a voice in improving the score. We actually call this the collaboration principle because that last bit is challenging. What are the stakes? If you overcome this research from Deloitte tells you the rewards are amazing. Not just rewards in terms of a rewarding place to work, but also the rewards in terms of lower employee turnover, being first to market with things, getting new ideas out there, being more innovative, profits, productivity, all those things happen when you can create a culture that's learning and collaborative in nature. So it's a great goal to go for. The challenge, as I alluded to earlier, is this idea of collaboration is challenging, right? So when business leaders were interviewed and asked how important is collaboration, 86% of them said it's critical. It's one of the most important things we need to do well as a team if we're going to survive and thrive in the future. That same group of people is then asked, how good are you at it? Only 7% said we're effective at collaboration. A huge, huge gap between those things. Now, what technology and who helps improve collaboration? It's us. It's where we are right now, right? It's Microsoft 365, it's Teams, it's SharePoint, and it's you guys at the heart of making that happen. This is one of the most important things you can bring to business. You guys are some of the biggest influencers in actually making that happen. It's an exciting time. Here's one way one organization did it. So this is an organization in the wine industry, so enjoy working with them. And they basically said, okay, you know what? Every person in our organization needs to have a number. But when we look at some of these teams, we say we want them to collaborate on coming up with a number. We want them to have a voice in deciding what their number is and a voice in influencing each other to improve the number. But when they looked at one of their teams in particular, their sales team, they said, this is a dispersed team. They're not in one office together more than once or twice a year, maybe a little bit more than that, but now with COVID, probably less than that. And yet we want them to be able to have a voice and influence and constantly improve this number. So what they did was they said, we know the number, the information, the data we need to create the number, that lived in their Dynamics environment. So they went out there and they pulled that out. They pulled that into Power BI and said, here's one centralized place where we can put that number and track it over time. But now we need to have another place where everybody can get together and work on the numbers, share stories around what's working for me. What am I struggling with? How can an older mentor mentor a younger person who's newer to this to teach them the ropes to how to do this activity management stuff better? That's where teams entered in. So now that Power BI data is in a Microsoft team. It can look at it in real time, but it can also do posts and conversations about it in real time to drive up the results. Now, if you look at this particular chart closely, you can see the red bar was their baseline. That's where they're operating when they started this project. The green bar was their goal. We want to permanently change behavior so we can make that almost every day. The purple filled in line there is their actual performance. And you can see they blew away their goal and they permanently changed it. Other than a couple of dips over the first year that they did this, they've permanently changed behavior by creating this collaborative environment using digital workplace technologies to make it happen. And by the way, SQUAG is an acronym that we've created for a type of goal you can do this with. It's called a small, quickly attainable goal. And it basically means something that individuals and teams have 100% control over. It's not this, hey, let's make revenue go up. Hey, we may not have control over that, but hey, let's make more sales calls per day. I can control that. I might need to prioritize differently, but I can control that. So listen, understand, connect, and know. That's an acronym. People who follow those 4 rules, who've adopted those 4 principles, are people who are powered by luck. They tend to experience more relationships at a deeper level and higher satisfaction than other people do. And organizations that adopt these 4 practices tend to experience more fruitful relationships inside and outside of their organization. So we call that being powered by luck. But as we kind of went through our journey and discovered this, we also realized there was something still missing, something at the heart of all this. And we realized through an engagement with a great client that it had to do with who you are. So luck, listen, understand, connect, and know, that's just what you do. But who you are, we call that now good luck. So you don't just do those things to get a result. You do those things because it's who you are. It's who you want to be. It's coming through as a human and as an organization authentically. It's what is in the DNA of your organization. So here's the best way I can explain that. I have a friend who is very successful, retired quite young, influences people for good. He's going on to do a lot of things in the nonprofit arena and is a very, very good person that wants to make good things happen. But he's also very calculating. That's part of why he's been so successful. Not a lot of emotion, very focused on, I just need to get these things done. And he just knows how to work a task list like nobody else that I know. And not a bad guy. He's doing good things with it. But because of that, he gets a lot of barbs from people like me who kind of like, hey, whenever we get together, you've got an agenda, right? We can never just kind of have a beer together or something like that. There's always something more to it. And so between many of his friends, including his wife, giving him that feedback, he said, I'd like to say his feelings were hurt, but I don't think he has any. But he said, I need to do something about this, right? I want to be a good person. I want to be a better person. So he did some research because that's what he does. And he read that people who have dogs are generally regarded as more warm, personable people. So he went out and got a dog. And that poor dog was the most neglected animal I'd ever met in my life, right? It was always so attention starved when I go over there. Now, the story has a happy ending because his kids connected with the dog, and then his kids left. It formed a different kind of bond with that dog, and it changed his life a little bit. But the idea is listen, understand, connect. That's what you do. Good luck is who you are. He was focusing on doing something to become who he is. And it was really something done at a deeper level. It's a challenging thing to change who you are, whether it's your corporate culture or your personal character. But when you look at that and actually focus on it, the results are truly amazing. I'm a numbers guy. When this good luck idea came up, I had to find the numbers for it. And the numbers are absolutely there. Becoming the right kind of organization, having the right kind of character, having the right kind of culture. As someone said a long time ago, culture eats process for lunch, right? So if you've got good culture, you're going to find your way. If you just do things, you're going to always feel a little awkward and imbalanced as a result of it. So a couple of closing thoughts on this. First of all, a lot of organizations are still weak in digital management and digital leadership. According to Harvard Business Review, 81%. What does that mean? That means they don't have digital built into their culture and into their character. They might have great digital tools, but they look at it as that's a tool for everyone else. As a manager, as a leader, that's not really my world. Other people use digital to get their jobs done. I'm going to kind of keep doing things up the way I've always done them before. Those organizations that have not adopted it tend to have 10% lower revenue growth than that about 20% who have done this well. So when your management and your leadership start saying, digital is for me, it is a tool for management, it is a tool for leadership, every bit as much as it's a tool for everyone else in this organization, then you start to see these amazing results. It is a full cultural transformation, not just people at the bottom of the organization or at the front lines of the organization. How do they do it? According to Harvard Business Review, they tend to have a digital coach and they tend to have a clear digital vision. They've put a plan together. So why do they need a coach? Well, part of it's probably because they are not digital natives. This is new to them. They need someone to help walk them through this process. I want to introduce you to somebody here in our last moments. Idania Gonzalez. I'm sorry, Isis Gonzalez. Isis looks like a normal kid in many ways, cross-country runner, engaged in her school, but Isis is dealing with an issue that a lot of kids deal with in our country, and when it's not dealt with well, it creates this vicious cycle. You see, Isis's mother is incarcerated. And ISIS is one of 2.7 million children that have a parent in prison. And by the way, about half of those children have never even met their parents face to face yet. So ISIS's situation was growing worse and worse as she was distanced from her mother, having almost no communication with her all. Her mother was actually transferred to a prison that was almost impossible for ISIS to ever make it to. And ISIS was going down a path that so many kids go down in this situation where she can wind up on the same journey that her mother went through. Until one day, another lady engaged with Isis and her mother, and she brought the love of Isis's mother to Isis via a small gift for Isis's birthday, in this case, through a program called Angel Tree. And through that, Isis learned she was loved and accepted and cared for by a mother who couldn't physically be there, but through this other person who was able to communicate that. And she created a new relationship with her mother and a new vision for Isis's future. Now, Isis is fully grown. She's a successful adult. Her mother and her is out of prison, and Isis and her mother are constantly having a great relationship, continuously healing and doing better. And Isis is a professional who, among other things, volunteers to give back to other kids of parents who are incarcerated. I'm going to leave this link up for most of the rest of the presentation in the blue bar there. If you want to do something amazing over this holiday season, follow that link. You'll go to the Prison Fellowship Ministries website. You go to Angel Tree. You can make a small financial donation, but what I would challenge you to do is donate a little bit of time. Through Angel Tree, you can find a kid who needs to understand the love of their parent, and you can potentially change a life forever. So take advantage of that. It's a small time commitment to make to do something that may have implications that last many, many, many years to come. So what did Prison Fellowship do with their intranet? So they started like so many others. They started with a great SharePoint design, very beautiful, but unfortunately it was failing because they didn't have that digital coach. They didn't have that plan. They didn't have information architecture and governance to kind of move them along the line to really know what they needed to do. But after they got those things, they rebuilt and revisited their intranet with all of those in mind. One of the things I love is their head of HR, who when they first started rolling this out was kind of the owner, said, digital is a cultural tool for us. It's not just a task tool. It's not just a news sharing. It is part of our culture. And I think that made a huge amount of difference here. And so scrolling through real quick, you can see some of the stuff that was on their intranet and that is on their intranet. But here at the bottom, you can see some of the comments that people have made unsolicited about the experience they've had in the yard. And the yard is what they named their intranet. The yard is a term that comes from prisons. And so they use that as the name. But you can actually see people unsolicited saying things like that. I don't know how many of you have your employees saying that about your intranet, but it's been an amazing experience with Prison Fellowship, watching how much this helped people in their journey in becoming more productive, more connected to other people in the organization. Now, more recently, a lot of things have changed as they've evolved. COVID changed things, but Microsoft has evolved quite a bit too. And all of those have really kind of come together in the last bullet point on this page, where Prison Fellowship is now evolving from a very SharePoint-centric start, where they kind of began their journey with their newest SharePoint as modern sites had just come out. So it was mostly done in modern sites, which was great. But then Teams was just barely beginning to come to the fore. Now more and more of what they do is becoming Teams-centered, and Teams is going to, they envision, become ultimately the front page of their entire digital workplace, not SharePoint, not Teams, not SharePoint as two different things, but actually Teams is now where they go to get to everything. And if you haven't seen some of the latest information that Microsoft released at Ignite about how SharePoint is going to be better integrated to Teams, you need to watch it, because if part of your life is maintaining and growing and updating a SharePoint digital workplace or intranet, you need to understand how much better that's going to get and how you need to be planning now to integrate that with what's going on with Teams. So if I can summarize everything I said in one slide, it is this: listen, understand, connect, and know. You've got a lot of hashtags there for all the things that are going on, and those 4 things you do, and that is being powered by luck. And then at the bottom of it, you have this idea of good luck, and that is why you do it. That's your purpose behind who you are as a company and who you are as an individual trying to create a better digital workplace. We are at an amazing time in history. You guys are at the epicenter of change. It's great to talk to Chicago about this, because you guys who are attending this event, you are building the virtual Chicagos of the next generation. You are the shoulders that the next 2 and 3 and 4 generations of humanity is going to be standing on. You have an amazing privilege, an amazing responsibility. You're living in an amazing time. Yes, it's transformation, which means some of it is really, really uncomfortable. I'm an optimist. I think that you and us and all these things we're doing together, we're going to solve problems we can't imagine solving right now. I can't tell you how many problems we solved as we went through the Industrial Revolution that we never thought we would have solutions for. There are a whole new set of them out there, and we're just now developing the capability to do these. Stick with it. You're doing amazing, amazing stuff. Visit these different sessions today. Learn as much as you can. Take away everything you can. Please give me feedback. Grab this link. You can grab the short link if you just want to type it in at the bottom there, or you can grab the image here via your phone and be taken to the speaker feedback survey. Let me know how I can do better, other than dropping the call halfway through. Sorry about that. I had some kind of internet interruption in this location. But let me know how this content can speak to you even more, how it can motivate you, how it can inform you, how it can inspire you. I referred to a bunch of things in the session, so I'm going to close with this slide. First of all, the blue bar up there at the top. If you didn't get it yet, grab that link. Go check it out. It's an amazing, amazing program through an amazing, amazing organization. If you want to learn more about the luck principle, you can grab a copy of the book on Amazon. It's a very thin, sort of a Saturday afternoon light read. I like to say I made it so easy that even an executive can understand it. So there's some nice vision and inspiration in it. Got a couple of free ebooks there for you. So if you're looking for ROI ebook to maybe bring to your leadership to help convince them of continuing to invest in digital, that might help. If you're struggling with Teams adoption and governance, I've got a Teams governance ebook there for you. You can just reach out to me via email or message me via Teams, since we're all on it, or any of the social channels is fine too. Be happy to get those to you. I'll just email them to you as a link or an attachment. And this is what we do. We're a Microsoft 365 partner. So I would be delighted to, sorry about that. I would be delighted to engage with you if you'd like to have any conversations around your thinking, your planning, your strategy, if you have coaching needs, or if you need some technical hands-on help with implementation. Me and the whole organization at C5 Insight are here to help you, and we'd be delighted to have that conversation. Thank you all so much for coming today. Really appreciate it. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and see if there's any questions I can answer. Probably the other thing too is I know we posted our sessions in another area, and you can post questions directly under the session header there if you want to put questions now or after the session in there. Thank you all so much. Really appreciate it. If I don't get to say anything else in this session, thank you so much for letting me share with you and be with you.